Hello, precious saints of God. This is Reverend James Nyebat, and I'm here again to talk about my upcoming book, Let Grace Speak. Judgment Can Wait. The last time I defined grace as the total package of the manifestation of God's power in the life of a person to help them to become saved, to teach them the Word of God, to help them grow in the faith, to help them understand their purpose in life and prosper in this world and make a difference. Now, today I want to talk about grace being sufficient. God's grace is sufficient. It never runs dry. It's sufficient for every occasion. It's sufficient for the sinner to redeem them. It is sufficient for the righteous to upkeep them. It is sufficient for the proclamation of the gospel. It is sufficient for training, for rebuking, for correcting, for building up the men and the women of God to become all God has called them to be. It's sufficient to raise up sons and daughters for God, for kingdom purpose. The grace of God is sufficient, not just for salvation, but to help you know how to understand, to help you understand how to live, how to prosper in the things that God has called us to do. God's grace is sufficient. Whatever your situation is, understand that God's grace is sufficient for you. Whatever the trouble is you're going in life, understand that God's grace is sufficient for you. Are you hurting with some pains? Are you sick? God's grace is sufficient to take care of that. Are you troubled emotionally? You don't know how you are doing here and there? God's grace is sufficient for that. Do you have some mental issues on your mind, something disturbing you without peace? God's grace is sufficient for that. Is it your relationship, your marriage that is troubled? God's grace is sufficient for that. Are you single? You're tired of being single? You want your own spouse, but things are not working. God's grace is sufficient for that. Or you're already married, but there's no happiness in your home. God's grace is sufficient for that. Are you financially stranded? You don't know who to call, where to go? God's grace is sufficient for that. Do you have a church and ministry is tough? God's grace is sufficient for that. Whatever you go through life, no matter whatever it is, God's grace is able to take you on. I know sometimes it gets tough. Are you trying to recover from divorce? God's grace is sufficient for that. A bad relationship, God's grace is sufficient for that. Are you recovering from some addiction, whether drugs, alcohol, or something? God's grace is sufficient to carry you on. Are you guilty about something that you did? God's grace is sufficient to lead you on. I don't know whatever your issue is in life, but for whatever occasion, whatever situation, no matter who you are, whether you're the bishop, the pope, or the pastor, or you're the leader in the church, or the ordinary person, or just a church member, or even maybe you don't even go to church, you don't know God. The grace of God is sufficient for all of us. The same grace the pope needs, the bishop needs, the apostle needs, the pastor needs, the same grace the church member needs, the same grace the prostitute needs, the gangbanger needs, all of us. The Bible says we are fallen short of the glory of God, but we are saved by grace, not by the works of our righteousness. I pray you receive the sufficiency of God's grace. God's grace is not limited. It can take care of anything you have. It can pass you through any storm. It can pass you through any fire. It can pass you through any flood waters. It can pass you through any rough wind, any hurricane. God's grace is sufficient. No matter the attacks of the enemies against your life, God's grace is sufficient to carry you through. Don't lose hope in the face of your adversity, for the grace of God is sufficient. I don't know what you're going through, but I just want to exhort you for you to know that God's grace is sufficient. Let's allow ourselves to grow in the grace of God. Let's receive the grace of God. As we receive this grace, let's give grace to others. Let it be a continuity. Let it be reciprocal. That we can celebrate the goodness of God together. Let us be our brother's keeper as we minister the grace of God. We are not called to be the police of our brothers and sisters. We are not called to be their prosecutors. We are not called to be their judges. We are not called to be their accusers. We are called to be our brother's keeper, our sister's keeper. As God has given us grace, let us not be like the elder brother of the prodigal son, who would not want his younger brother to come back after he came back to the senses. Let us not be like the Pharisees, who decided to judge that woman because they caught her in adultery. But they too had their own sin, for which they ran away. They couldn't stone her to death. People are hypocritical. They know how to talk about others, but they don't know how to talk about themselves. That's why Jesus said, before you see the person in somebody's eye, go take the plank from your eye. Look, no matter whatever you're going through, God's grace is sufficient for you. I pray today you enjoy the grace of God. Allow God to come in your life. Allow God to minister to you. God bless you.